Michael's story and the lesson from the biker threats. It was a breezy Saturday evening at a park in Fairfield, Connecticut, where families gathered, children played soccer, and the sound of laughter echoed through the peaceful air. On this ordinary day, an unexpected turn of events would change the life of a 16-year-old teenager. Michael. Michael, a 16-year-old boy, was sitting alone under a tall oak tree, a book in hand. He wasn't the type to chat aimlessly or draw attention to himself. Instead, he preferred to live quietly. Dressed in a sharp black suit, a white shirt, and polished shoes, Michael looked every bit the serious young man. He was waiting for his younger brother, Jordan, to finish soccer practice so they could head home together. Michael had promised their mom he'd wait, and there was nothing unusual about his day until that moment. But then, suddenly, the peacefulness of the park was interrupted by a loud rumble of motorcycles. Michael glanced up and saw a group of bikers, 5 in total, slowly riding into the park. They parked their bikes near the soccer field, creating an odd contrast with the families enjoying the day. The bikers weren't laughing or chatting, like most people would. Instead, they were scanning the area, their eyes locking onto Michael. And Michael noticed them too. At first, it didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary. But as one of the bikers, a burly man with a shaved head, nudged his friend and started walking toward Michael, the tension in the air became palpable. The sound of their boots crunching on the gravel path was deafening, each step echoing louder as they approached. Michael felt the man's heavy footsteps before he even saw him clearly. When he looked up, he saw the burly biker flanked by 2 others, their expressions unreadable but determined. They were closing in on him, and the hairs on the back of Michael's neck stood up. But despite the uneasy feeling in his stomach, Michael forced himself to stay calm. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. "Never let them see you sweat." Michael didn't react right away, keeping his eyes on the book he'd been reading. He knew that reacting too quickly might escalate things, so he chose to stay composed. But calm doesn't last long when you're being watched. As the bikers continued to approach, one of them spoke. "What are you doing here, kid?" The burly man's voice was rough, direct, and there was something off about it, something that made Michael uneasy. Michael lifted his gaze briefly, his brow furrowing slightly. "I'm waiting for my brother," he replied, his tone polite but firm. The burly man smirked, glancing at his friends. "This doesn't look like your kind of place," he said, his words dripping with something unspoken, an edge of challenge in his tone. Michael's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. "It's a public park," Michael answered, meeting the man's gaze. The biker's smirk faded slightly. "Got a smart mouth, huh?" he said, stepping closer. The other 2 bikers spread out a bit, closing in from both sides, forming a semicircle around Michael. Parents and children were still scattered around the park, unaware of the tension building under the oak tree. Michael's heart was racing, but his face remained calm. His mind was racing too. He wasn't afraid, not yet, but he could feel the situation shifting. Years of karate training had taught him to observe, to anticipate, and to react, but he also knew that fighting wasn't always the answer. It was a last resort. "I don't want any trouble. I'm just here for my brother," Michael said, keeping his tone even, but with an edge of firmness. But the burly man didn't back off. Instead, he leaned down slightly, his face coming too close for comfort. "Trouble? Who said anything about trouble?" he sneered. Michael's eyes never left the biker, his hands resting calmly on his knees, ready for whatever might come next. Years of training had taught him how to read people, how their posture, their movements, even their breathing could give away their intentions. And these men, they weren't here for a conversation. They wanted something else. The biker stepped even closer. "Maybe you should show us what you've got," he taunted, his friends chuckling behind him. Michael didn't flinch. He remained still, his expression impassive, while inside, he prepared for whatever would happen next. His silence, his calmness, was more unnerving than any angry words could have been. But the burly man seemed to sense it and leaned in again, his shadow falling over Michael's form. "What's the matter, kid? You scared?" the man taunted. Michael took a slow breath, letting the words wash over him. Fear wasn't the issue here. What concerned him more was how long it would be until Jordan finished his soccer game, and how much longer the park would stay unaware of what was happening. Time seemed to move slower with each passing second. But before Michael could think much further, a voice broke through the tension. "Leave him alone." Michael turned his head slightly to see his younger brother, Jordan, no more than 10 years old, standing a few yards away. Jordan had wandered off the field, his face still flushed with sweat from the game. "Jordan, stay back," Michael called out, his voice firm, but his brother didn't listen. The bikers turned toward the boy, their grins widening like predators spotting an easier target. "This your brother?" one of them asked, pointing a gloved finger at Jordan. "Maybe we should teach you both a lesson." Michael's pulse quickened, but it wasn't fear he felt. This time, it was determination. He slowly stood up, his movements deliberate, his eyes never leaving the group. He shifted his weight, planting his feet firmly in the stance he had practiced countless times in the dojo. "Don't touch him," Michael said, his voice calm but sharp with steel. The burly man laughed, shaking his head. "Look at this guy. Thinks he's tough," he sneered. But Michael didn't budge. His stance remained unchanged, his silence unnerving them more than he realized. The bikers thought they had the upper hand, but they hadn't seen what Michael was truly capable of. Not yet. The situation seemed to reach a boiling point as the bikers stood there, grinning, their eyes narrowing at Michael as if they were waiting for him to blink. Michael's chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, his breathing slow and deliberate. He wasn't afraid, far from it. The years he'd spent in karate class, honing his skills, had taught him that true strength didn't lie in raw muscle or intimidation. It lay in control, discipline, and the ability to stay calm in the face of adversity. The burly biker took another step forward, his face twisted in anger. "You think you can stand up to us, kid?" he spat. Michael's lips parted slightly as he spoke, his voice calm, yet laced with an underlying force that made it clear he wasn't backing down. "I don't want trouble. I'm just here for my brother. But if you continue this, I won't hesitate to defend myself." The biker didn't seem impressed by the words. His friends, standing off to the side, exchanged smirks. They had clearly underestimated Michael, and that was exactly what made the situation so dangerous for them. They hadn't expected someone so young, so composed, and yet so ready to react with precision and speed. The burly man sneered, raising his hand as if to shove Michael aside. But Michael was already prepared. In a single fluid motion, Michael sidestepped, his body moving like water, fast and effortless. The burly biker's hand missed by mere inches as Michael took advantage of the shift, moving behind him with practiced precision. The biker stumbled forward, off balance, as if the very ground had shifted under his feet. He grunted in pain as he struggled to regain control, but before he could turn around, Michael had already seized the moment. In a swift and controlled movement, Michael's open palm struck the man's wrist, twisting it sharply to disarm him. The force of the strike sent a shock through the biker's arm, and with a yelp of pain, he dropped his hand to his side, taking a step back. He was now furious, eyes wild with rage as he glared at Michael, who stood still, unshaken. "What the hell?" the man growled, but before he could take another step, Michael was already moving again. The first of the other two bikers lunged at him, throwing a wild punch that Michael easily dodged with a quick duck. Michael's movements were fluid and sharp, like a well-rehearsed dance. He never moved too quickly, but every step was measured, and every action deliberate. As the biker's punch missed, Michael used the opening to strike. His foot flew out in a powerful kick aimed directly at the biker's knee, sending the man crashing to the ground with a loud cry of pain. The biker howled, clutching his leg, unable to get up. The last of the bikers hesitated for just a moment, long enough for Michael to pivot, turning smoothly on his heel. Without warning, his foot swept in a spinning arc, hitting the second biker square in the ribs. The impact was like a thunderclap. The biker staggered back, gasping for air, his hands clutching his side. He barely managed to stand as the force of the blow knocked the wind out of him. The burly leader of the group, red with fury, roared in rage. He charged at Michael, swinging both fists wildly, trying to knock him down. But Michael was faster than the biker had anticipated. The fight was no longer a contest of strength. It was a contest of control, of technique, and of mind. The burly man swung his fists like a brute, but Michael dodged each one, light on his feet and precise in his movements. The surrounding crowd had started to gather, whispers spreading, murmurs of disbelief and awe rippling through the air. Parents stopped watching their kids, their eyes wide as they witnessed the unfolding drama. Some had already pulled out their phones, recording every second of what was happening under the oak tree. No one had expected this. No one had expected the calm, well-dressed teenager to turn the tables on the group of intimidating bikers. But there he was, standing his ground. The burly biker swung one last time, this time trying to grab Michael by his suit jacket. But Michael was ready. In an instant, he twisted out of the biker's grasp, dodging the man's clutches with ease. The biker's hands grasped only air as Michael moved faster than he could follow. Before the man could react, Michael's knee shot forward, delivering a sharp strike to the man's solar plexus. The biker stumbled backward, gasping for breath, his anger draining from him as the air left his lungs. Michael stood firm, his breathing steady, as the biker clutched his chest. The leader's tough exterior was cracking. He was no longer the invincible figure he had once seemed. Enough! Enough! The biker spat, his voice strained as he fought to catch his breath. His face was red, the veins in his neck bulging from the exertion. He glanced at his two companions, who were still on the ground, one clutching his knee and the other still trying to recover from the blow to his ribs. The tension in the air was thick, but Michael stood unmoving, his stance unwavering. The crowd around them had grown, and the park now felt like a stage. Everyone watching, waiting for what would come next. "You're not going to do anything, are you?" One of the bikers sneered, his confidence faltering as he backed away slightly. Michael, never breaking his gaze from the group, spoke quietly but with an air of finality. "You don't want to do this. Leave now, and no one else gets hurt." The moment hung in the air, heavy with unspoken words. The burly biker leader looked at his friends, who were still recovering, then glanced at Michael. He hesitated for a moment, clearly torn between his pride and the realization that this fight was over. His friends were already limping back to their bikes, muttering curses under their breath. The leader's face twisted with frustration, but he gave a final, menacing glare at Michael. "This ain't over, kid," he spat, before turning and storming off to his motorcycle. As the sound of their engines roared to life and faded into the distance, the crowd that had gathered began to murmur and applaud. The tension in the air dissipated as quickly as it had come, leaving behind only the aftermath of the confrontation. Jordan, still standing at the edge of the scene, ran up to his brother, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and admiration. "Michael, are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Michael knelt down, placing a hand on his brother's shoulder, his expression calm. "I'm fine," he said with a reassuring smile. "Let's go home." But even as they walked away, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. Not yet. The tension of the moment was still fresh, and the words of the leader echoed in his mind. "This ain't over, kid." It was clear that the bikers had underestimated him, but there was a larger lesson here, one that Michael was about to learn for himself. The journey back home was quiet, but the echoes of what had happened that evening still lingered in Michael's mind. The adrenaline was wearing off, but his thoughts were clearer than ever. The bikers were gone, their threats lingering in the air like smoke from a dying fire, but the lesson they had unwittingly taught him wasn't something he could forget so easily. Jordan's questions kept circling in his mind. "How did you stay so calm? What if they come back?" Michael's answers had been simple, but the truth was, what had truly guided him through that confrontation wasn't just his martial arts training. It was his mindset, his ability to stay grounded and make decisions in the heat of the moment. As the two brothers neared their home, Michael couldn't help but think about how often in life we are faced with moments that demand us to be more than what we appear on the outside. So many people would have given in to fear, buckled under the pressure of intimidation, or reacted out of pure instinct. But Michael had something different. The calm resolve that came from years of discipline and the quiet strength to stand firm, even when the odds seemed stacked against him. His mother was waiting on the porch when they got home, her arms crossed, her expression a mix of concern and worry. She had been waiting for them, no doubt sensing something had happened. But Michael didn't want to worry her more than necessary. He didn't want to recount every detail of the confrontation, but he knew honesty was important. "You're late," his mother said, her voice filled with that soft concern that only a mother can express. She noticed the look in Michael's eyes, the way his brother stayed unusually quiet. Michael hesitated for a moment, glancing at Jordan, who still seemed shaken by the events. "We had a little situation at the park," Michael began, choosing his words carefully. "But everything's fine now." As he recounted the events, he noticed his mother's face shift from fear to a kind of quiet pride. She listened intently, her lips pressed together as Michael spoke, her eyes glistening with emotion, not just from relief, but from understanding. "I'm proud of you, Michael," she said when he finished. "You protected your brother and yourself. But promise me one thing. Don't take risks like that unless you have no other choice." "I promise, Mom," Michael said, his voice sincere. He meant it. The fight had been necessary in that moment, but he knew that violence should never be the first option. It should only ever be the last resort, when all other avenues had been exhausted, when there was no other choice but to protect yourself and those you love. That night, as Michael lay in bed, the events of the day replayed in his mind. The tension of the fight, the fear of the unknown, and the relief that came with walking away unscathed. But what stood out to him the most was the power of his own discipline and self-respect. The bikers had tested him, but he had passed the test, not because of how hard he could hit or how fast he could move, but because he knew when to act, when to remain calm, and when to stand his ground. He had always been taught that true strength was not about size or force. It was about knowing your own worth and standing up for yourself without letting fear or intimidation dictate your actions. That lesson had come to life in the park that evening. The words of the burly leader echoed in Michael's mind one last time. "This ain't over, kid." But Michael wasn't afraid. He had learned something more important that night than any lesson in fighting. He had learned that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about acting with integrity, standing tall in the face of adversity, and knowing when to walk away. Michael wasn't afraid of what the future held. He knew that life would throw more challenges his way. But now he had something stronger than fear. He had the discipline to stay calm, the confidence to face the unknown, and the wisdom to know that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to walk away, on your own terms. The lessons we can learn from Michael's story, what Michael experienced that night in the park, is a powerful example of what it means to stand firm in the face of adversity. But the true takeaway here is not about fighting. It's about standing up for what's right, regardless of the situation. It's about having the courage to confront difficult circumstances without letting fear or anger control you. Michael's calmness, even in the face of a potential confrontation, shows us that true strength doesn't lie in being the biggest or the toughest person in the room. It lies in being prepared, in having the discipline to control your emotions, and in knowing when to act. The bikers in the story had underestimated Michael. They thought that their aggression would intimidate him, but they didn't know the power of self-control. Michael didn't allow their taunts or threats to push him into a reactive state. Instead, he stood firm, he assessed the situation, and he acted when the time was right. His confidence came from the fact that he knew his own worth and refused to let anyone take that from him. This story isn't just about physical confrontation. It's about the quiet strength we all carry within us. It's a reminder that we don't need to back down in the face of aggression, and that standing up for ourselves and our loved ones doesn't always require force. It requires calmness, preparedness, and a solid understanding of what is truly worth fighting for. So, the next time you face a challenge, whether it's a confrontation at work, a tough conversation with a friend, or any other moment of conflict, remember Michael's story. Stay calm, Stand tall and know when to act, when to walk away, and most importantly, when to defend your integrity and your worth. True strength lies in the ability to remain grounded in any situation, and that is the real lesson we should all carry with us. Thank you for watching Michael's story and the powerful lessons on courage, discipline, and self-respect. While we can't predict the challenges life will throw at us, what matters most is how we're prepared to face them, with calmness and confidence. If you feel inspired by this story, don't hesitate to share this video with someone who might need a reminder of their inner strength. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another inspiring story. Leave a like if you believe that courage isn't just a choice, but a way of life, and comment sharing your own thoughts or experiences when you've stood firm in the face of adversity. We'd love to hear your story. Remember, courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in spite of it. Always believe in your own strength. See you in the next video.